and played to that vision. And Terrion Arnold fits exactly what we're talking about.
What's happening, sports fans? I'm your host, Johnny Gaz. Thank you for returning for another video. We are coming off an historic event for the 2024 NFL Draft. The city of Detroit put on a fantastic event. Over 750,000 people swamped the streets of Detroit just to experience the NFL Draft. They broke the record for attendance in any draft in the history of the NFL. And I'm so proud of my hometown city. So many people went down there and have fantastic stories, and it was just a great experience for all that was involved. But today, we're going to take a look at the Detroit Lions 2024 NFL Draft. Did they fill the needs that they were looking for? We talked in several videos leading up to the draft what the Lions' needs were, what they had to do for this to be a successful draft. So we're going to do a full recap of all the picks the Lions made in the 2024 NFL Draft. We'll do a review and kind of talk about where the Lions are heading in the future. Let's get into today's topic. Before we dive into the draft, make sure to like today's video. If you're digging the vibe here at Johnny Gaz Sports, hit that subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss any future videos here on the channel. Definitely want to see you come back for future videos. Let's dive into the draft. So here's the full picture of the Detroit Lions 2024 draft class. We'll briefly go down their 6 selections here from the draft. Obviously, we know they started in the first round by trading up for cornerback Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. They then double-dipped at cornerback in the second round at pick 61, bringing in Ennis Rakestraw, the cornerback out of Missouri. They then had to wait until the 4th round where they traded up into that round to address their offensive line with tackle Giovanni Manu, the large offensive lineman out of British Columbia. Followed up again by trading into the 4th round yet again for running back / safety Sione Vaki out of Utah. Then moved into the 6th round where they did some work at defensive tackle, selecting LSU's Mekhi Wingo, and finally took the guard in the 6th round for their last selection, the guard out of Boston College, Christian Mahoganey. So we have extensively gone over what I felt the Lions' true needs were heading into the 2024 draft. We did 3 different mock draft simulations over the last several weeks, kind of outlining and highlighting all of the players that I felt the Lions should go after here in the 2024 draft. And it really held true in the first round. I think historically we saw a draft that was so offensively heavy up front that many of the higher-end defensive players slipped down the board. I think we had 13 or 14 draft picks that were solely offensive to start the draft. Obviously, very quarterback-heavy, wide receiver-heavy. And that caused the cornerbacks, the defensive backs, to slip down in that first round. Both Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell slipped down in the draft. Philadelphia ended up picking Quinyon Mitchell ahead of Terrion Arnold. But as the cornerbacks continued to slip down and down the first round, I think that's what caused Brad Holmes to ultimately make that move. I mean, we extensively talked about who could be available at pick 29 if they stuck there. We talked Kool-Aid McKinstry. We talked some other options. But once those cornerbacks started to fall down the draft board, I think Brad Holmes said, we're going to take this opportunity to move up. Now, I did a mock draft sim where they had moved from 29 to 15 and had to give up not only their second round pick, but a second and third round pick for 2025. Well, in this case, they move up from pick 29 to pick 24, giving up their third round selection in 2024 only to be able to draft cornerback Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. I think this was the perfect scenario for the Lions. I think between Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell, they really couldn't have gone wrong. But I believe that Terrion Arnold was the top cornerback on their board, and that is what allowed them to have the comfort to say, we're going to move up and get our guy. So it was really nice to see the Lions take that cornerback, get what I thought and what I think the Lions thought was the top cornerback on their board at pick number 24. So I was feeling really good about their first round pick going with Terrion Arnold, the cornerback out of Alabama. So at that point in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, options are endless in the second round at pick 61. Could we then stick at the defensive line, go the edge or defensive tackle? We could maybe then look at a wide receiver, an offensive weapon, or even look at that offensive lineman that you're hoping for. But again, the draft board continued to dictate that some of these high-end defensive players were still slipping and slipping even into the second round, and that held true at the Lions pick at 61. So they decided to double dip, take a second cornerback, Ennis Rakestraw, out of Missouri. So a little bit of a surprise, but I don't think in looking at what the Lions' true needs were, and what I had identified was defensive back, cornerback, of course, and then defensive line. Brad Holmes came out and said after the first day of drafting that it wasn't the organization's plan to take 2 corners. That was not the plan, but the board just happened to fall that way. And Brad Holmes indicated that not only was Terrion Arnold their top cornerback on the board, on their board, but Ennis Rakestraw was their second-rated cornerback on the board. So at that point, you're picking at 61, and he basically falls in your lap. And Brad Holmes came out and said it wasn't the plan, but he's too good to pass up. So you could make the argument that double dipping at cornerback maybe doesn't solve all your needs, but truly we have to trust Brad Holmes. If they identified these 2 guys as the top of their board, the top 2 corners, knowing that that is a primary need on the defense for the Lions, I like this. I like it a lot. Both these players are long arm, lengthy corners, cover guys. They're both good in man coverage and press, and that's the defense that the Lions like to run. That's Aaron Glenn's scheme. Now, he got away from that at the end of 2023 because of the talent deficiency, but now you're starting to build younger talent in that room. Guys that can man cover, that are better in press, that are not afraid to come up and make tackles. Both Terrion and Ennis are kind of out of that same mold. So I really think it resets the cornerback room. Now, we've talked extensively, again, in previous videos about what the Lions have done in the offseason to address the defensive backfield. They traded for Carlton Davis, and they made the free agent acquisition for Mekhi Robertson. They also brought back Emmanuel Moseley, which we know has the injury concern. So you have 3 guys there, veteran guys, that are not long-term solutions. All 3, Carlton Davis, Mekhi Robertson, and Emmanuel Moseley, are guys that are on short-term contracts. I think Carlton Davis is a 1-year through 2024. Mekhi Robertson is a 2-year. And Emmanuel Moseley was a 1-year re-sign coming off of his 2 ACL injuries. So the Lions had to build young depth in that room because you cannot expect all 3 of those veterans to come back or for them to re-sign them heading into the next season, 2025. So to have 2 solid guys, 2 cover corners, guys that can compete for not only the 1 but number 2 jobs, you're setting yourself up for the future in your defensive backfield. So I really like their first-round and second-round picks at cornerback. We also need to mention the Alabama connection. This is the 3rd season in a row that Brad Holmes has made a trade in the first round, and they seem to have a connection to the Alabama program. Now, that's not a bad thing. Alabama, Nick Saban, that program in general is just an NFL filtering system. And the Lions have identified several players over the last several seasons, obviously Brian Branch being a key contributor to that, Jahmyr Gibbs, among others, but now you're bringing in Terrion Arnold. So you have familiarity within the system, and you got guys coming from the SEC, big-time football, that really assimilate themselves well into the NFL. So after the first and second round picks, we had to let the third round slide, as we know they gave up their third round selection, trading up for Terrion Arnold in the first round. So then we get to round 4, which at the point we started round 4, we didn't have a pick available. Well, Brad Holmes worked his magic and traded up twice in the 4th round. So this will be the 3rd trade up in this particular draft. So at pick number 126, they go with the behemoth offensive tackle out of British Columbia, Giovanni Manu. He is a huge offensive tackle, but extremely athletic. I think he had the fastest 40 time and 3-cone drill out of any offensive lineman at the combine, but he is very raw and obviously playing lesser talent in Canada than he would have in the United States collegiate system. But you have, again, a huge guy that you can build behind your current offensive line. We know they re-signed Penei Sewell, and they have Taylor Decker at the tackle position. So you're not looking for a guy to step in and start. You're looking for a guy to build behind what will be the best offensive line in football, in my opinion. So you really is just having this guy as a depth piece for 2024 and hoping to build him for the future, potentially as the replacement to Taylor Decker at right or left tackle, depending on what you do with Penei Sewell. Again, in the 4th round, they trade up a second time, this time for Sione Vaki, the safety/running back out of Utah at pick number 132. Now, I have to be honest, I didn't know much about Sione Vaki, but in now doing a little bit of research after the draft, it's very rare that you have a guy with such a wide variety skill set. I think he's primarily a safety, and I think that's really why the Lions drafted him. not only for safety, but maybe as a special teams kind of jack of all trades guy, because he also was used as a running back at Utah. So you have a guy with a ton of versatility, a guy that I think will be very helpful in special teams. And the Lions seem to really lean on those guys that give you several different areas where they can help the team out. And this guy covers all aspects, offense, defense, and special teams. So because of the trade-ups in the 4th round, the Lions relinquished their 5th round pick, which then moves us into the 6th round, where I think the Lions got their greatest 2 value picks in the 2024 draft. Moving up to get to pick 189, the Lions select defensive tackle Mekhi Wingo out of LSU, which he was a captain at LSU. He's had several productive seasons. He did have an injury in 2022, but had a good season in 2023 and just really slipped down the board, I think, because of those injury concerns. But I believe, although he's an undersized D tackle, I think you're seeing more and more of those type of guys do well in the NFL. And again, we're looking for him as a depth piece behind OLine McNeil, to sort of, be another defensive tackle depth piece there as part of that defense. And I think it's a great value pick in round 6 of the NFL draft. Their second pick in the 6th round, which was actually their true pick at pick number 210, they went with the guard Christian Mahoganey out of Boston College. So again, addressing their offensive line concerns. I think guard was one of their primary needs. We know that they re-signed Graham Glasgow at one of the guard positions and then brought in Pro Bowler Kevin Zeitler from Baltimore for the other guard position, but I don't think either of those guys, again, are long-term, years down the road solutions at guard. So they need someone to build behind them, hopefully, build up that guard depth so he can then step into the role either next season and beyond. So here's a look at the revamped defensive back and cornerback rooms for the Detroit Lions. And obviously with the draft picks now of Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw, you have completely revamped this defensive backfield. The way I see it is kind of how they have it laid out here. You have Carlton Davis as your CB1. He's the veteran. He's got playoff and Super Bowl experience. And I think for 2024, you sort of expect him to be your top cornerback. Behind him is where I think Terrion Arnold comes into play. You really need him to step into the CB2 role and work himself into being your top cornerback down the road. Behind them is where you have Amik Robertson as corner of your nickel dime package guy. And then you have Ennis Rakestraw, who will kind of figure out how to work himself in. And again, both him and Terrion Arnold are guys that eventually could compete for a number 1 cornerback spot. But you see now that we have so many pieces, number 1, that we didn't have last year. Talent in that room. Guys like Kendall Vildor, Emmanuel Mosley, Stephen Gilmore, they are now true depth pieces. True guys that can step in if there's an injury concern, if a few of the guys don't pan out. But you have a completely different defensive backfield. And I think leaps and bounds above what they went into at 2023. Of course, as part of the draft process, and we can't forget the undrafted free agents that the Lions have now brought in since the draft concluded. You see at the very top 2 wide receivers, and at this point it doesn't truly matter who it is. I mean, the wide receiver Isaiah Williams out of Illinois, they actually paid money to, so I think they have a little bit of thought behind him that he might be able to make the team. All the guys you see here will be kind of competing for a roster spot. It's very rare that any of these guys are ultimately going to be difference makers or the solution in any position room. But it's just interesting that you see you got guys at wide receiver, at edge, linebacker, still in the defense, offensive line, a tight end, Isaac Rex out of BYU, who was a captain there. So you have a lot of good undrafted free agents to at least take a look at and see if you can build depth behind some of these guys that we just saw on the roster there. I think one of the best things about the new Lions, the brand new Lions, the organization in general, is they're very straightforward in their approach. What they say to the fans, the media, they typically go out and do. And over the past several seasons, they've now developed this draft habit, the draft strategy that has worked for them. And it's showing, and it held true again in 2024. Brad Holmes and the organization identifies the players on their board that they feel helps them out the most. They then will do what is necessary to go and get their guys. And it's panned out. So as much as I'm not going to sit here and give grades to draft picks at this point, I think you have to allow time and years to see truly what's the end result and then how great is that draft pick. I'm very happy with what Brad Holmes and the organization did here in 2024. Yes, there are some questionable picks. I was curious about the large offensive tackle in round 3, Manu. Again, he's a massive offensive lineman, but I think is a very raw project. And to take him in the third round when I think he may have been available later in the draft is questionable. But I don't question if Brad Holmes and the organization see something in him. And ultimately, if he ends up being an offensive line piece down the road and can fill one of those tackle spots in future seasons, then it's worked out. So I'm not going to sit here and bust on that particular pick. I also sort of question the safety running back, the Vaki pick out of Utah. But again, you have to have those type of guys with versatility. You want to take guys that help you in special teams. And if that's his ultimate contribution to the Lions, and then I'm okay with that. What I also thought was kind of fun is that the last 3 picks, Vaki and the 2 guys in the 6th round, Mahoganey and Wingo, all 3 of them were team captains. And that sort of is the Lions draft strategy. They like guys with leadership, guys that sort of are in the mold of Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, leaders, grit, that idea. Well, all 3 of those guys were team captains, and you'll see a lot of that in the undrafted free agents and team leaders. I mean, that's just a theme of who the Lions like as a player to bring to this organization, and it's proven, and it's worked. So I'm very excited about what the Lions did here in this 2024 NFL draft. I think they filled what they felt was their greatest need, and in my opinion was maybe the reason why they didn't get to a Super Bowl last year. They've now solidified their cornerback room, their defensive backfield. They have so many options and ways that they can now scheme their back end of the defense that I'm truly, truly excited. And I think Aaron Glenn and the Lions probably feel the same way. They've built depth behind their offensive line, which we talked about was a huge component to this draft. They took 2, what I would say is 2 great project pieces, guys that can build in behind the current guys you have, give them time to become better offensive linemen and hopefully work themselves in to what will be the best offensive line in football. And then they took those additional pieces that I think overall will help them. The defensive tackle Wingo, I think, is a fantastic value pick there in the 6th round. I cannot believe he dropped all the way down there. And same thing with Christian Mahoganey, the guard, in the 6th round. I don't know how he made it all the way down. But again, the Lions identified the positions of need. They weren't afraid to go up and get their guys, and I think this will prove to be a successful 2024 NFL draft. So what did you think of the Lions 2024 NFL draft? Did they hit on all the needs? Did they get what you wanted here in this draft? Or did they just swing and miss? I really want to know. Tell me what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. We'll definitely have some fun videos coming up. We got the schedule release coming out in the first couple weeks of May, so come back and see me for that. We'll take a look at the Lions schedule in detail, maybe make some predictions on what their final record will be. That should be a lot of fun. But the 2024 NFL Draft was an amazing spectacle. Again, I'm so proud of the city of Detroit, all the people that came out. I have several friends and family members that were able to make it down to the event over the last several days and had nothing but glowing reviews about what was going on down there. So kudos to the city of Detroit, the Detroit Lions, and everybody in the surrounding area for making that a fantastic draft experience. If you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gas Sports, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notify bell so you don't miss any future videos here on the channel. And make sure to take care of yourself, your mental health. That is most important. I want to see you guys come back and hang out with me on future videos. Thank you so much for your time. Have a fantastic day.